In celebration of President's Week, the Vanderbilt Museum in Centerport has set up a special presidential exhibit featuring two rare artifacts once owned by the Vanderbilt family that celebrate George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. The first display is of this famous painting of George Washington, once owned by the Vanderbilt family.
This painting is after Gilbert Stuart's famous Lansdowne portrait. That's this three-quarter length portrait of George Washington that's kind of an iconic image for the American government at its inception. And this is, we believe, a copy. We do not know who the artist was or whether it was a copy that was done in the time of Gilbert Stuart or whether it was done later in the 1800s. But it's obviously quite old and has a gilded frame, which is very delicate, with an American eagle over it. And it's a wonderful addition to our collection, and we enjoy putting it out on President's Week for the public to view. It's in the Portuguese sitting room, and it can only be viewed when you purchase a ticket for a house tour. So when you buy the grounds pass, you have to pay just a few extra dollars to take the house tour of the living quarters with a tour guide. And it's a wonderful, informative tour, and that's kind of a treat. During President's Week, we put the portrait out.
Interestingly enough, there's very little known about the actual painting, including how Mr. Vanderbilt acquired it.
We're not sure. Like many of his possessions and things that were left behind here, we have a term in the museum world called found in collection. And often that's how we explain something's appearance. We do occasionally have detailed descriptions in the files of where Mr. Vanderbilt acquired things. For example, we have Native American artifacts in our ethnographic room, which were gifts from Cheyenne chiefs. And that's documented. However, a lot of the things were here, and when Mr. Vanderbilt lived here, they were artifacts, or not artifacts, but possessions that he had. Maybe they were dear to him, maybe things passed down through the family. This particular painting, I'm sure he treasured it. I'm sure it was something that he was, proud to have or glad to have in any event. As you notice, the style of the painting, it's very dark. And there's a word for that that art historians use called tenebroso. And it refers to kind of the background. It's almost, there's another word too that they used to use, sfumato, like smoky. It's dark and smoky almost. And often those type of solemn, very solemn air to the portrait, a lot of those gave it an air of reverence, or they tended to use a lot of that technique after a person had died to portray them, because it gives them a solemn quality, and it's a respectful, solemn type of technique that artists use to convey things. As we know, artists are very clever and also very subtle sometimes, and use symbolic things in paintings, or the way that Washington is portrayed standing with his hand out. Or some portraits then were done in three-quarters, some were done from the waist up, and each technique is used to convey something different. And this obviously is a very solemn portrayal of General Washington, and rightly so, and gives him the respect that the artist obviously had quite a bit of reverence for the person who they were painting.
The second display is of this authentic 1961 letter written by Abraham Lincoln himself.
We hope that the public enjoys it. This is the first time they're going to see it in a long time. It has been in the archives. We've had copies of it out, and actually I've shared the copies with the Sachem Library and people who have done Abraham Lincoln celebrations for President's Week in the past. So, but this is the first time in a long time that our museum visitors will get to see the actual document in an exhibit. So it's very appropriate, and we're happy to be able to put it on display. It's an original letter. We had it verified and documented by the Papers of Abraham Lincoln, which is a not-for-profit grant-funded organization that was formed by the state of Illinois, I believe, to document every single piece of correspondence with Abraham Lincoln's signature, or to Mr. Lincoln, to document his entire presidency and perhaps his life. So they came here, and they removed the letter and the envelope and a picture of Mayor Fernando Wood, that's who the letter was written to, so that they could scan it with modern technology. They just did this a few years ago and include it on their website and in their documentation. Now it's electronically preserved forever, and it's being shared, which is the best thing. Not just with our public here, but it's being shared worldwide on their website. And that's really what it's all about, is sharing your artifacts. And you want to share the scholarship behind them and their images with as many people as possible, because otherwise, you know, they're useless if they're not shared. That's what, you know, it's like music. You know, if there's no one here to, you know, listen to it, what good is it? So same way with a museum object. You want people to see it.
And just like the Washington painting, this letter has a little bit of a mystery behind it too.
In a roundabout way, it may have had something to do with the Vanderbilt family at one time. Don't forget, the letter predates our Mr. Vanderbilt, because the date of the letter is 1861, the year that Lincoln became president. That's the year he took office. The letter was to Mayor Fernando Wood, the mayor of New York City, who was said to be a corrupt mayor in accordance with you know, history's take on him. And he and Lincoln, I don't think, liked each other too well or got along that well, or maybe it was a political difference of opinion. However, this letter has a very cordial tone, and he writes to Mayor Wood that he'd like to thank him in advance for all his cooperation and his offer of help with, and I do believe he's referring to the war effort for the Civil War, or the lead up to it. What our take on it is that perhaps Mayor Wood was instrumental in getting troops sent down on the railroad from New York City, and the Vanderbilts, of course, own the railroad. So we're thinking one of the past generations of Vanderbilts had this letter and passed it down through the family, and that's how our Mr. Vanderbilt wound up with it. It's an interesting letter. I have included with the display a transcription of the letter that we did just recently, because the letter, in addition to being difficult to read in Lincoln's hand, because, you know, handwriting styles have changed over the last 100 or 2 years, and they tend to form different letters and use different phraseology. And he does use a few words, actually they're abbreviations for words that the modern person may not be familiar with. One of them is abbreviation ULT period, and he uses it in the context of a sentence. It follows a date. And I came to find out that is the Latin abbreviation for the word ultimo, and the word ultimo in that context means in the month before this one. So when he puts that after a date, he's saying your letter of the month before this one. It makes sense in that context when you read it. He also signs the letter, your obedient servant, A. Lincoln, just A. period Lincoln. And he abbreviates the word obedient, OBT period. And it took us a little while to figure that out too, to make sure that that's what he meant, but we've seen other letters signed that way. And again, the Papers of Abraham Lincoln project was a great resource, because I got to see other letters that had similar phrases or similar word usage, and I was able to read this letter better for that. So it's been a wonderful experience to work with this letter and to work with that project and the local school districts and libraries who have been interested in it.
Gress says it's fascinating being able to look at the words written by Lincoln himself.
The staff is excited about it. It's very special to, you know, be able to be near an artifact that he, you know, piece of paper that he touched. And we also have the envelope in his hand with the original postmark and the date, and it's all legible, and it's still in very, very good condition. It was well cared for by the Vanderbilts. So it's a great thing for us.
And historical experts say it's not unusual for Vanderbilt to have collected and displayed artifacts from the presidents. He was considered to be a very patriotic individual. In fact, he donated his prized yacht, the Alva, to the war effort.
Mr. Vanderbilt was a very patriotic person, and I can understand why he would have had it here. We must remember that Mr. Vanderbilt donated his last ship, the Alva, to the Navy for World War II, and it was repainted, renamed the Plymouth, and sent out as an escort ship. It was torpedoed and is at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean today. We have a model of it in our invertebrate room.
Even more proof of this can be seen by all of the eagles which line his home, Eagle's Nest. You can see the presidential exhibit through Sunday, February 27th. For more information, you can check out the Vanderbilt Museum's website at www.vanderbiltmuseum.org. In Centerport, Chris Collora reporting.